Hello and welcome back to the History of Video Games. My name is Ben, and I'm joined by the one and only Wes. What's up, Wes? How you doing?
Doing pretty great. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. I took off on Friday, so I've had a bit of a longer weekend.
I mean, that's always
With
good.
all that extra time, I've done nothing.
Sometimes that's what you gotta do.
Yeah. But I've been chilling, playing some games I'm excited to talk about, but why don't you start us off, Wes? What have you been doing?
Well, so I've kind of been all over the place in my gaming escapades, I guess. The one I think I want to talk about today is I went back. I know last week I mentioned that I finally finished off Subnautica, like officially built the spaceship. Spoilers, launched into space. I made it.
Mm-hmm.
You survived the planet. Big spoilers there. But and I was so in the mood for that spooky, in some sense, underwater atmosphere, but also just like the awe of all the environments that they create and all the creatures there. So I started up a new campaign, doing it exactly the same way, just the typical survival mode. And I found, in a weird way, that I had like still definitely really afraid of the main scary big baddies, the Reaper Leviathans, but a lot more confident. And it's kind of weird because I looked up tons of stuff about, where these resources are, how to build this type of equipment, the patrol paths of Reaper Leviathans, so like I don't accidentally run into them. And it's a great thing because it got me to overcome my fear of the scarier enemies in the game that could just like two-shot your submarine and then you're done. But it was also weird because it does take some of the constant suspense out of it. Like there's certain areas in the game where I know all of the biome transitions, how they look, and like sometimes the music changes between biomes too. So I can just be with almost 100% certainty like, hey, I'm in this area, I am 100% safe. Nothing I can do is accidentally going to bring me into a new area. There's nothing that can really kill me here, which is nice in some sense, but I could see it kind of taken away from the experience a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And it made me take a step back because I'd been in my hunt for more Subnautica content because I've been so in the mood for it recently. I've been watching a ton of update videos on the sequel that they're doing for Subnautica, which is apparently a smaller game, but it takes place on the same planet, just in Arctic area, where there's actually some parts of it where you're on land, and then a lot of it where it's these crazy ice Arctic water biome stuff.
Nice.
Yeah, it's super cool. But I've been looking up so many videos of it and realizing that if I'm watching the like step-by-step implementation of all these updates, I'm going to get into it and then just be like, oh yeah, this guy spawns here, this guy spawns here, that's over there. Okay, I beat the game, Part of the reason I enjoyed Subnautica in like 2019, even though I think the official full release of the game was like 2017 or something crazy like that, or 2016, was just that I knew nothing about it.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of shot myself in the foot there a little bit, although I think I'll probably forget a lot of the game before Below Zero, which is the DLC before Subnautica Below Zero comes out. And I'm just going to try my best not to watch any content.
Yeah.
Make sure I get the game when it's at full release. I'm not going to do this one in early access because that's a fun way to experience the game. But for this type of game, I just want to go into it and be like, what the heck is going on? Because that's where I've had my most fun with it. Just like all of these crazy underwater creatures, these sounds where I don't know, like this sound, even though it sounds scary, isn't really that scary, or like this sound is terrifying, even though it sounds like cute and cuddly. Like all those associations that you
right.
learn by looking it up. So I've been having a lot of fun playing through the first one again, taking a break from it now, but getting more comfortable with the crafting and kind of, since I already know a lot about the first game, just expanding that and leaning into it and just learning everything about it, being comfortable exploring the super scary areas of the game and stuff like that. But I'm really excited for the 1.0 release of Subnautica Below Zero and just going into it semi-blind. Not really.
Okay, nice. Is there a like Steam Workshop support on Subnautica?
I think there is. I forget. I know people definitely mod it. I forget how open to modding it is, though. I need to look into it
It would be
more.
a good game for it.
I know there is a modded multiplayer in it because when it released, it was like originally in their scope, they were thinking about multiplayer. Of course, with all these projects, depending on what they want to accomplish, they take stuff out. So multiplayer was on the chopping block when they released the game, but somebody modded in multiplayer for it. And that is something I'm super excited about. I need to check and see if anyone's made like new environments though.
Yeah.
The different biomes are so handcrafted in that game. I'm sure, modders do crazy things. So I'm sure people have done some cool stuff with it, but I'll have to check it out. I have a feeling it's not like 100% integrated. A lot of the stuff I've seen is on Nexus mods and not necessarily in Steam Workshop.
Mm-hmm. I see. Okay. Yeah, I was just wondering. That's cool though. I didn't know they were coming out. The Arctic sounds awesome. I can totally see that being cool.
Yeah.
So you just have to like hold yourself from spoiling it.
I know, which I'm horrible at, but I think I've binged so much Subnautica I can take a break from it for now and hold myself back.
Yeah.
Well, why don't you tell me about what you've been playing recently? I know you said you got some good stuff to talk about.
Oh yeah. So well, you were trying to get me to play a new game last week, and I was like, okay, I want to do that, but I also want to actually finish the one I was playing.
Right.
So I sat down and I did everything I could to try to beat the Lord of the Rings, the Third Age game that I've been playing. And I was able to beat the game 100%.
Oh, nice.
Which was great. And it's added to the short shelf of games that I've actually beaten. So it felt really good. The ending was really weird just because it was all over the place. Like, I think the last time I talked about it on the podcast, I was in Minas Tirith, and there wasn't even like a final boss, or there might have been like a ring wraith or something, but like I think I had Gandalf with me, so it was like a joke, And so that was easy. And then the last level is you in Pelennor Fields, which is where like the Witch King is. That was a boss. It's where the big elephants are. I don't know if you remember those from the movies, but
yes, yeah.
The elephants were super hard. You had to fight like 5 of them, which was super annoying and just took forever. But they were really hard because they had an ability where it would stun your whole team. Like, they had one ability that was like a stun the whole team. And that was just super annoying to deal with. And they also had a more or less like a mana leech kind of ability. So like they kept trying to make my healer not be able to heal and stuff, and I was like, this is so annoying. But I did okay. I made it to the Witch King. I thought that might be the final boss, but it wasn't. And for some reason, even though like the generic orc characters are immune to stunning, the Witch King was not. And I had 2 characters I could stun it, so I just stun locked the Witch King and beat the boss that way. But then after that, you fight a little bit more. You get to a place where you have to fight 2 elephants at once, and either one of them can stun your whole team in one go. And I was like, this is impossible. Even though my characters were pretty good and highly leveled, I just couldn't. I tried for like an hour and couldn't do it. And eventually I was like so frustrated, I looked up a guide and I was like, how are people supposed to do this? And it turns out one of the other characters in your party that I never play with actually has an ability that prevents people from getting stunned. I was like, oh.
Oh, no.
I see. So I switched him in, and he's like the main character of the game too. Like, the story kind of revolves around him, even though the story's very bare bones. But he was already like pretty powerful just because I guess the developers gave him like the best gear. Like, I don't know. He just seemed pretty powerful even though he was under-leveled. And he had that ability that just prevents your whole party from getting stunned. And I just like pretty easily broke through the elephants then. And after that, you're joined with Aragorn for a while. And that made the whole next like sequence super easy because he was really good. And then the final boss was the Eye of Sauron itself, which doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. But like you're fighting like on this big open field. And then the final battle is like, you're like up in a big tower and you're like, what? How did we get here? So yeah, we fought the Eye of Sauron, and for that one, I ended up changing one of my dudes to the guy who prevents stun locks, not because we were getting stunned, but he was just better. And that made me kind of feel bad. Like, I probably made the game a lot harder for myself because I wasn't using this character who just seems to be
Right.
better. So that was a little annoying, but I was able to beat him on my first try. It was like sketchy at times, but my healer had this one ability where you could kind of ahead of time make it so that if somebody dies, to get instantly revived. On top of that, once they get revived, they get to go first in the turn order. So I would just like cast that ability on my healer, and then as soon as the healer died, they would resurrect, they would get their turn first, and I would just cast it again, you know? So it's kind of like impossible for them to lose unless, I don't know, some crazy sequence of events happens, or I try to be a little bit more risky than I should or something. So it took a long time to beat him, but we got it done, and I don't know, it wasn't really much of an ending. It was more like they just showed the ending from like the third movie, and then it was like, our story is done, but your story is just beginning. And that was the end of the game. And I was like, what? I think you mean our story's done. Like, it's the end. So
Yeah.
it was kind of strange.
What's
but,
that supposed to mean?
Yeah. Is there supposed to be a sequel? Like, I don't know. But I'm glad I finished it. It was a fun game. Like I mentioned, there was a lot of balancing issues. There was a lot of just super annoying stun locky BS stuff going on. But I really enjoyed it. Mainly just because it was Lord of the Rings, though. The actual story of the characters were like barely anything there.
Right. Like if it was an original property, like an original IP, it probably would have sucked.
Yeah, exactly. And the whole game's narrated by the voice actor who does Gandalf, so it's like you can't beat that. Like it's just too good. So yeah, I had fun. The scenery and the graphics were actually a lot better than I thought, especially at the end. You're fighting with Minas Tirith in the background, and it looks actually really good. In general, it was a really fun game. I thought about maybe going back and playing it more and trying out some of the other characters, because you have 6 characters, and I played almost the whole game with just 3 of them. But then I was like, I don't really want to do that. So I think I'm just going to move on to some NBA Street next time. So
Hey, yeah.
but yeah, it's over. It was a really hard game. I died a lot, and the last like 10% of the game took like 5 hours. Just crazy, but
Yikes. You weren't using the right OP characters for the right
that's
overpowered
right.
situations, I guess.
Well, it just goes to show too that they don't do a good job of explaining. Like I didn't
Right.
know that he even had that power, you know, and it kind of makes me wonder, like, do they just expect you to use him when you're fighting the elephants? Because it doesn't seem possible with any other group of people. So it's like it's just very strange and makes me question like what their intentions were for that part. You know what I mean?
Right.
So yeah, it's
Well, cool. I mean, I'm glad you can check it off your list. Yeah.
yeah, and who knows? Maybe I'll take another crack at some other RPG from my youth and try to actually beat it. But we'll see.
But we both have a long list to get through, and
Yeah.
we'll get there. Keep updating it.
All right, shall we move in the special topic list? We have a bit of a short one, not too much to say, but
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, so we kind of have a game on our list related to Battlestar Galactica this week. And I thought that seems to be a pretty important IP, and it came out in 78, albeit a little bit later in the year. But I thought, you know what, since we're kind of mentioning something related to it today, let's take a quick glance at it, because although I know the name really well, it's mainly from The Office, and not actually from watching. I've never watched the show at all, so I don't really know much about it. So I was very interested to see it. So let me give you guys a quick rundown of what the plot is, because I didn't know anything about this. But it's a sci-fi show, but I don't think it takes place in the future. Essentially, there's apparently, I think, 13 colonies of mankind, apparently. And I guess Earth is like the 13th colony is separated from the other ones. The other ones are like super advanced. And so those 12 colonies were in a war with this like warrior robot race called the Cylons, which apparently were created by a reptilian race, but I don't know much more about that. But essentially, you know, they had this fight with the Cylons. I think they had a truce agreement, and then somehow the Cylons surprise attacked them and like wiped out most of humanity anyway. And so humanity is now like this traveling caravan of ships that's going across the galaxy trying to get to Earth, the last colony of mankind, and the Cylons are just chasing them. So The whole TV show is just about this group of humans just kind of running from the Cylons and fighting them when they think they have the upper hand. But that's what the TV show is, anyway.
Yeah, and so I want to talk a little bit more about when it came out in 78, the impact it made, and sort of just some interesting facts about the series itself. I know a little bit more about it because I watched the reboot, which was, I think, early 2000s or something like that, which is really awesome, by the way. Not sure how this one is. But the pilot for this series actually had a budget of $8 million, which seems insane for 1978.
Mm-hmm.
It seems insane to me now, but I'm also like ignorant to what movies and TV shows pay for their episodes, so I'm sure that's like nothing in today's time. But the pilot released in theaters internationally earlier in 1978, and then a little bit later as a theatrical release in the US in 1979. The pilot was very well received, even though it was interrupted in some parts when it was aired on TV in the US in 78. There's confusing dates because there was 2 original releases for this, but it was interrupted when it was aired in the US on TV by a special report from the White House about the Camp David Accords being signed between, I think, Israel and Egypt. And it just like broke in halfway through, but apparently it still got really good ratings, even though it was interrupted halfway through. And so originally they planned to make it as 3 made-for-TV movies, but then after the second episode aired, the creator Glenn Larson announced it would be broadcast in a weekly format, which apparently was a surprise to all of the writers who wrote this show, which I think is hilarious. I don't know how he managed to either get on TV or in radio and be like, hey, since you like it, now it's weekly, and without like anybody else knowing, but apparently that's how it went. And then just some of the interesting sort of legal stuff around it. 20th Century Fox sued Universal Studios, who produced Battlestar Galactica, claiming that it had stolen 34 distinct ideas from Star Wars. I guess when you're making a legal case, you got to have the exact numbers, but I just thought that was hilarious. And sci-fi writer Isaac Asimov even said that the 2 properties were very similar. And since Star Wars came out first at the time, he said he liked Star Wars a lot better. And so Mattel, who we're going to be talking about later today, also made a bunch of Battlestar Galactica toys, but they ended up being an extreme choking hazard. And they had to pull all of them. George Lucas said, hey, I don't want anyone to be confused with these Star Wars toys because ours don't like hurt people, but the Battlestar Galactica toys do. So there's all this bad blood going between Battlestar Galactica and Star Wars. The show ran for, I think, a little over a year or 2 years before it was canceled. In part, it was due to the cost to produce the show. And also, right when it came out, it was very popular. They moved it to the primetime 8 o'clock slot on ABC, I think. But then it only pulled in about 28% of the 8 o'clock audience, whereas the previous show that was at that time slot pulled in 40%. So, for whatever reason, I think it just really underperformed after initially being super exciting. Of course, it's the origination of the ever-famous fake curse word frack instead of the F word, which was basically created to get around FCC fines for cursing in a television program. They still used it in the reboot, and it was fantastic because the actors were good enough that, I mean, the way you said it, it just sounded like they were saying the F word. Like, you didn't even think twice about it, which I always thought was really great. And then getting into some of the differences of the television release that came out in 78 in the US and then the cinematic release. Apparently, they were different lengths. The story were actually different, including one of the main characters being executed in the cinematic release and then him becoming a main character instead in the TV version. The Cylons in the movie were actually humans instead of robots, but people speculate they were changed to robots in the TV version because then you could blow them up and it wouldn't like raise any eyebrows.
Right.
But yeah, it's just weird. There's like these 2 different versions that came out around the same time for like the Canadian release and the US television release, but they were slightly different. Apparently the theatrical releases were in part because it was so expensive to make the pilot that they wanted to make up some money, but just this weird, whole bunch of weird, interesting stuff around it. And it's, of course, very popular at the time. So I'm sure at least for a couple years while it's still on the air and popular, we're going to be seeing computer games, handhelds, and stuff like that based off of it.
Yeah. And who knows, maybe I'll check it out one of these days. Go back and watch it. But yeah, with that being said, why don't we move into the games? All right, welcome back. We're going to just jump right into it today, getting into the games. The first one that I reviewed, it's the next in the line of the PC 50X chips. This is the PC 505. Just as a quick reminder, we didn't have dates for any of these PC 50X games, so I decided to split half of them up and put them in 77, which we did last year, and then the other half we're going to do this year in 78. So this is the first in that second half. There's 8 total. This is number 5. The actual AY3 whatever chip that it uses is the 8605 chip, and you'll see it mainly plays submarine games, and that's what I'm going to be talking about today. But we also have, I wanted to mention quickly, we have on record what an 8604 was, but we don't know if any games came out with it. It doesn't seem to be, but it apparently played blockade or barricade style Snake games. But for whatever reason, that one doesn't seem to have come out for the PC 50X line, but this one did, the 8605. So let me get into what the games actually are on this chip. Nowadays, I'm like worried about the PC 50X line because like my worst game of last year was the PC 50X, but they also have some cool ones sometimes.
It's a crapshoot. You never know.
Yeah. Well, this one is okay. It's all right. It plays a bunch of submarine games and then weirdly some space games, but I'll get to that in a second. The submarine games, which is the most prominent ones, essentially what you're looking at, we've got 1 and 2 player versions, but there's one person at the bottom of the screen that has a submarine and they shoot up. There's also someone controlling a destroyer at the top that lays mines going down. And then above the destroyer on the actual horizon is what I'm assuming to be like a cargo vessel. And so you have this weird interplay between the two sides where they're not equal. So the submarine gets points if they shoot either the destroyer or the cargo ship. But then the destroyer, I think when they drop their bombs or whatever, they seem to be able to hit in an AoE type, larger effect radius so that the submarine really has to get out of the way. At least I think that's what's going on. Maybe, the bounds of the submarine just aren't very good, but I think that's how they make it supposedly even. I think it still kind of heavily favors the submarine just because they have 2 big ships to shoot at, and the destroyer player has to try to hit this small, fast submarine at the bottom. And if they miss, they don't get anything. So it's a bit of a weird game, but that's the main gameplay anyway. There's a couple variations in the console, mainly 1-player variations where 1 player can play as the submarine and the destroyer, and cargo is controlled by the computer. The cargo is always controlled by the computer. It just goes left to right and across the screen, back and forth forever. But the destroyer will be controlled by the computer as well. And then you can also flip sides and play as just the destroyer, and then the submarine will be played by the computer. So that's like the main modes. There is one other kind of major change to this setup, which is a mode called Night Sea Battle. And in the Night Sea Battle, both ships won't be visible unless they're firing. And that also includes the cargo ship. So if you're the destroyer player and you don't fire anything, both you and the cargo ship will be invisible on the screen. But then once you fire, you guys light up until that depth charge has exploded. And the same thing is true with the submarine. So we've seen kind of similar things to that before. I think it's maybe done a little bit better here just because of the color, which I'll get into. I think the whole game has a pretty nice graphical display to it. But that's the major modes on this. And then for some reason, there's also two other game modes called Space 1 and Space 2. And it's essentially the exact same game, but instead of ships and a submarine, it's just two weird saucer things and you just fire lasers at each other. But they play exactly the same, and the lasers like aren't instant. They take as long as like a depth charge would going down through the water. So it seems like a very strange mode to add, and graphically that one doesn't make a whole lot of sense either. Like it's played on a green background where it would obviously make more sense being played on a black background.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, it's just kind of weird. It feels like it's tacked on. I don't really understand the point of that one. There's two game modes in that. I only was able to see video for one of them, which was just the 2-player version. I think the second one had to have been a 1-player version, but I'm not positive about that. But, the main draw is the submarine games and the invisibility toggle. So that's what I'm mainly basing my scores off of. But okay, let's get into the ratings. So, starting with the graphics, this was the best thing about this chip. We essentially have like 3 major zones. We have a dark blue, all of this is in true color by the way, but a dark blue at the bottom, which I guess is representing deep sea ? We have a lighter blue, that's where the destroyer is. The submarine is also in the light blue for some reason, so it almost looks like another ship, but I'm pretty certain that it's supposed to be under the water. But the destroyer is on there, and then at the top of the light blue is where the cargo ship goes across, and that's on the horizon, and the top where the sky is in a bold red color, which is a little strange because usually the sky's blue, and this is like a red sky, which maybe you can kind of say like it's a sunset or something. It definitely is a stark contrast, I'll say. But I don't know. I think if you play it long enough, it kind of works in a weird way. It looks like sunset or something. So I didn't mind it too much, and the fact that it's all in color is cool. All the ships are black. The submarine is red, which is, again, a little strange considering it's supposed to be under the water.
Right.
But the outlines for the ships are very simple. The cargo ship and the destroyer is very simple, but they do a fairly good job of describing what they are. And the submarine, I think, is the weirdest looking one because it has like almost like a small tower in the middle of it, which maybe it's supposed to be like the porthole or wherever where you come out, but
yeah, or like the old school subs with the sort of command center thing up top or whatever it is.
Right. Yeah. So maybe it's supposed to be like that, but it's just like not proportional.
Right.
It's very strange, but I think they do a good enough job. I think the ships themselves look very good. The alien space game mode looks terrible. As I mentioned, the background is green. One person is yellow and the other person is blue, which is just a bad combination of colors, I'm going to say. And the quote unquote spaceship or saucers are basically plus signs. So, and the lasers that come out of them are very strange as well. They kind of extend like the full distance from where you shot them, and then it's like a solid line down to wherever the plane is that the other person is playing on. Because all this stuff is like you can only move your ships or space shuttles like 2-directional, left and right. So that's very strange. It makes a lot more sense in the submarine game because they're not like lines that extend forever from the ship, but instead it's more of a normal bullet looking thing. Although I will say in the submarine games, the submarine, when they shoot, the actual projectile is longer for some reason, and it moves faster than the destroyers. I guess that's because it's supposed to be a depth charge compared to like
torpedo.
Torpedo, yeah. So maybe it makes sense. To me, it kind of made sense, but again, it plays into the fact that it doesn't feel very balanced. But let me get into that in a sec. So for graphics, overall, I gave it a 2.25. It's in true color, and the colors look fairly good. You have some sort of gradient for a playfield, and I like that. So whenever I see it. Also, whenever you get hit, your ship kind of flashes for a second, which I probably actually don't like that as much as it having like an explosion animation or something. But, I'll take what I can get. So 2.25 out of 10 for the graphics. For gameplay, I gave it a 1.5 out of 10. And that's because even though there's 5 game modes, the space ones look really bad. Some of them are only meant for 1 or 2 players, so they're kind of the same. And then the only other true difference in the game mode is the invisible mode, which seems cool, but I don't know if you'd be like spending like hours on that. So I think there's a bit of a limited playing time with this chip. And also, it just doesn't seem very well balanced. Like the submarine just seems way better because they have 2 ships that they can hit, both of which are quite large. One of which the computer controls, so you can't dodge with the cargo at all. Like the best thing you can do is just try to anticipate where the submarine has to go to try to hit the cargo ship and put your depth charges there. But it's definitely kind of a lopsided game, which, you know, it might make it fun to switch off and on between the 2 different roles, but I just don't think that they're balanced very well. So I just gave the gameplay 1.5 out of 10. For sound, I also gave it a 1.5 out of 10. You have a couple different sounds, but they got on my nerves. One of them, I think, is supposed to be kind of like that sonar sound, but it sounds a lot more like a doorbell in this version. So I didn't like that as much. Some of the shooting sounds were like pongy sounds. There was like 1 or 2 others. The sound for an explosion I thought sounded really bad. I don't really know what it sounds like. Maybe like a piece of paper like wobbling. It's very strange. It's not the explosion sound that I want, so it didn't blow me away, but there are a decent number of sounds at least. So 1.5 out of 10. For relevance, I just gave it 4 out of 10. I don't think it's particularly relevant, but it seems to be one of the better ones for the PC50X line anyway. And, you know, as far as like having true submarine games on a console, I don't know if we've seen anything as true to like the original Seawolf or something as this. I know there's like Air Sea Battle, for example, on the 2600. But, I mean, I guess it's pretty similar. I'm not sure. So I gave it 4 out of 10 because I think it definitely has the potential to influence some things, but I don't know if it did anything in particular. And then overall, I gave it a 1.75 out of 10. It was okay. This isn't going to be a poop, I don't think, on our list. So it's just like a pretty decent submarine game if it is a little one-dimensional. And the gameplay, I'm a little hesitant about it because it doesn't feel very fair for both players. But
right.
Especially if playing one player, though, could be a lot of fun. I don't know. So yeah, that's it. And then a weird space game tacked on at the end for, I guess, extra is a good way to look at it.
So was there some kind of like cargo ship in the space version too?
No, there's no cargo ship. It's just 2 space shuttles against each other.
Weird.
I know. When I saw it, I was like, why isn't this being played on a black background? Like, it looks like you're playing on a pool table.
Yeah, it feels like they were like, dang it, everyone's doing black backgrounds and we got to do something to keep it interesting. But
they call it space, though.
Yeah, like that's where we're fine with the black background. That's where it makes sense, you know?
Yeah. I forgot to mention, too, it does keep score, which hopefully we don't have to keep mentioning. You guys can just kind of know that there's score there, but it does keep score. But yeah, that's Submarine.
Cool.
You guys should definitely check out a video of it if you can, just because of the gradient in the sea to the sky, to the quote-unquote sunset sky that it has. It is a pretty iconic or striking look, I'd say. So that's worth at least checking out. But yeah, that's it.
Not as bad as we may have expected a PC50X game to be.
Yeah. When I originally took a look at it on the Pong Story website where we get a lot of info, I think it only said there had 2 or 3 submarine games. And I was surprised when it had like 6 or 7. But I guess that's only if you count the one-player versions as different games. So
right.
That's how they marketed it anyway.
Well, then I guess let's move on to some honorable mentions next. The first one that we have for today is Piccolo by Irem, which came out sometime in '78. and it is another licensed version of Circus by Exidy that we don't have too much info on.
Yep. And then sticking right with that, we've got 2 games here by Sega, Seesaw Jump and Seesaw Jump 2. And if the names didn't give it away, they are revised versions of Circus by Exidy. Although I don't know enough about them to know if they changed anything about it from the original Circus. It's possible, but we just didn't have much info on that. It seems like they had to change something to make it go from at least Seesaw Jump to Seesaw Jump 2, both
Right.
of which released this year. But
unless they were pulling the old remove some features so you can add features in a different version.
It's very possible.
Well, good. At least these honorable mentions are making me feel validated for picking Circus as my number 1 game, right, for last year. But
it was a good game.
It was and continues to be a good game. So we'll have to check out at least one of those if we see anything that makes substantial improvements. But next up, we're going to take a look at the first game I covered, which is another in the series of Tornado Baseball by Midway games. This one is called Extra Inning, came out in March of 1978. It's the newest game. The most recent one in this line that we covered is Double Play, and just some information about the cabinet. Pretty simple design, but it does have some nice like baseball illustrations, less cartoony, more like painting of a guy actually hitting a baseball kind of stuff. The background in the cabinet looks really good too. It's that same sort of painted background that the screen projects onto. It has the crowd, it's got a whole stadium, the diamond, everything looks really good. And of course, it lets the game only have to worry about projecting in white, so they can focus a lot more on those details. The owner could also adjust the game price for each credit and also whether each credit was worth 1 to 3 innings. 1 inning goes really fast in this game, so I can't believe that there'd be some people, well, I guess I can believe it, who would charge like a quarter for 1 inning, but I'm hoping there's a lot of 3 inning games out there because that's kind of nuts. And the difference in this one from Double Play, apparently, the outfield is controlled with a dial, which I believe is the same as Double Play, but the batter is controlled with an 8-direction joystick. I think I was reading somewhere that it was originally like this in Tornado Baseball, changed for Double Play, and then it's back to this for Extra Inning. So getting into the gameplay of it, it plays a pretty standard game of baseball, and it is almost exactly the same as Double Play, which came out last year. The only notable changes, or possibly even the only changes at all, are the chance to win an extra inning if you hit the ball in 6 different areas of the field without it being caught. So it doesn't have to be in a row, these 6 hits. It applies to both players, oddly enough. So you can sort of like work together to get an extra inning, which seems a little weird, unless that was just a glitch in the emulator version of it. But since it's 6 different things, I could see that being a little difficult for somebody to get in 1 inning, especially with how easy it is to get out in this game. Each area on the playfield on the actual painted background is marked spelling out Midway. So the 6 different sections that you have to hit are each level corresponding to Midway. And the letters are also displayed on the screen, and they get larger when a ball has hit the corresponding area. So it's this weird thing where it's just like Midway with this super elongated I if you've hit that section. And then once you make all of the word Midway bigger, you get your extra inning, basically. And that's the gameplay feature added to this game, as far as I can tell. Hence why it's called Extra Inning, I guess, as their big, like, this is how we market this game. You can win an extra inning. So I wasn't a huge fan of that. And I do want to say, these ratings, some of them may be a bit harsh because it still is a really good game. Double Play is a good game, but my main problem is, okay, this is a couple months later, we're in 1978, and it's Double Play with an extra inning.
Right.
And then that's it. So if you see a little bit of reflection in any of my ratings of graphics or sound, it's probably just because it hasn't changed at all. Still really good, but hasn't changed. So let me get right into my ratings with that. Graphics, I gave it a 2.5 out of 10. The graphics are exactly the same as Double Play, but with the addition of the Midway letters on screen that can change size. Everything looks really good in this game, as we've talked about before. The players do have like these weird literal hourglass shaped bodies, but they actually look like people, which is a big accomplishment in 1978 and 77.
And there's a lot of them too.
There are, yeah. I mean, it's almost what feels like a fully manned field. You know, you got the batter, you can have 3 people on base, and I think you have like a pitcher and 6 people in the outfield or something like that. So there's a lot on screen at once. It's pretty impressive. The scores are all displayed in a really clear manner that also just makes sense and like actually looks like a scoreboard in a baseball game, which is really nice. The ball moves across the screen really smoothly. The bat is still just a floating bat with no hitter. I'm guessing that might have been one of the painted details where somebody was on there as well. It would have been nice to see a little animated guy swinging the bat. But other than that, that still looks great. And the players have animations for running the bases, running on and off field, or running towards the ball, and everything like that. The one thing I will say about the graphics that I would like to have seen change or maybe be a little different is that it like bolts across the screen whenever the ball is in motion. It kind of like seems like it would be really hard to catch, but of course you do have a lot of outfielders, so it might not be that bad. So I wish it would move a little bit slower. It's hard to keep track of sometimes, although they do have a really nice effect where whoever catches it actually like throws it to the pitcher. Or like if somebody's running to first and somebody catches, I guess what would have been a ground ball, he'll throw it to the pitcher who will then throw it to the person on base, which is really nice.
Mm-hmm.
Small detail, but it makes it look like real baseball happening on screen.
Yeah.
And then going on to the sounds, I give it a 3.5 out of 10. The sounds are still really good. And I mean, for this whole series, they've been pretty good. The sound when you get a double or a triple is really strange. It's kind of like this electronic, like slide whistle kind of thing.
Yep.
And I'm sure you mentioned this as well, but that threw me off listening to it. The crowd noise, though, is really good. It does sound a decent bit like people cheering. I mean, it's obviously electronic, but it's a lot more believable than a lot of stuff we've heard before. And the best part, of course, is all the music. Just like Double Play, it plays when you start the game, Take Me Out to the Ball Game, a little excerpt of that. It plays like The Charge, Tune, and several other ones. But as far as I know, there wasn't any extra music added to this version either, unless there was a new song that played when you got an extra inning. But all the videos I watched and when I played this game myself, it was pretty hard to get an extra inning. So I am not able to confirm that. As far as I could tell, it was exactly the same sounds. So then going on to gameplay, I gave it a 2.5 out of 10. I really love that this plays a competent game of baseball with the players running the bases, different styles of pitches. I mean, when you swing and how fast the ball's going or what angle it's at actually seems to determine where the ball goes, which is great. The main problem I have with it is that if you're playing one player, the computer is like really good at playing outfield. Maybe I just don't know how to hit the ball, but they would just always catch it when I was throwing to like left field or whatever, or when I hit the ball to left field. So there's probably specific ways to do it, and I'm sure if you played this a lot, you would get really good at both outfield and batting. But the game is, for me at least, my first couple times through it, just really fast and didn't give me much time to adjust to like how to move the outfield and how to swing and time and all that. But I think in an actual arcade cabinet instead of an emulator, it probably would be a little easier too. So I do like, even though I keep ragging on the speed of the game, I do think that's an asset to gameplay in general, just because it makes it feel like the game isn't dragging on forever, which I feel like we've also had with baseball games before. But it also means you kind of have to play a decent number of games before you get used to knowing how to hit and how to pitch. And then for relevance, I gave it a 2 out of 10. Double Play and Tornado Baseball, I think, did some revolutionary, cool arcade baseball game stuff. But Extra Inning just feels exactly the same. And I don't count adding that extra inning as like a revolution for 1978. Right. You know, it's not that big of a change. It's still a really good baseball game, but it's just not different enough. And so overall, I gave it a 2.5 out of 10. Well, I think Extra Inning is just as good as Double Play and probably better because it has extra features. The extra features it has aren't that great, aren't super interesting, and are kind of hard to get. So it's still definitely worth the play, but if I was someone in 78 and I owned Double Play, I don't know if it would be enough to motivate me to get Extra Inning.
Mm-hmm. I think it's fair.
And again, it's like definitely a good game, but it's just so weird to rate it when you're like watching a video of Double Play side by side and thinking, wow, they really didn't change anything. And of course, they had a good thing going, so they might not have needed to change anything, but yeah.
Were you able to check out the hand painted background on this versus Double Play? I think it was changed, but I don't know which one looks better.
I actually didn't get to compare those. I compared the gameplay, so I should have taken a look at that. I know that there is the Midway in the stadium to like mark where each zone for each letter is in Extra Inning.
Mm-hmm.
But that's good to know that they at least changed something with that.
Yeah, I'm just double checking. It could be the same. All we have is the flyers to go off of for the hand painted background, and it looks, it looks pretty similar, to be honest. It's a kind of green for the field. You do have the track, which is a dark brown color, which is nice, and a stadium with a sky above that. It looks darker on Extra Inning, but that could just be like the angle of the photograph. So
right,
that's maybe not a good sign.
Again, not that many changes. Still a good game though.
Yeah. All right. Well, at least you got the chance to play a mainline baseball game, Wes. Because I don't know if you've done one before. But
no, it's been a while, and baseball games aren't always my thing. But it was fun to see like, oh, there's good baseball games in '78.
Right. Yeah, I mean, we've seen some of those RNG ones too. It's like, oh no.
Yeah, no.
But let's move on from that. We've got a bunch of honorable mentions here before we're going to kind of wrap up with the last reviews. So let's start with some more clones. We've got Golden Spear and Golden Spear Mark V by Cebu and Bonanza Enterprises, Table Hustler by Jatra, and Bump by Burkheister. All of these are clones of Hustle by Sega, which was the snake game where the snake would actually get longer if you ate more points or whatever that were on the screen. But all those came out in 78, but we don't have much info on them, including what month they came out. So moving on from that, we've got another one here. This one's called New Shooting Trainer by Nintendo, and I almost didn't see this one because I kept getting it confused with Nintendo's old game called Shooting Trainer, and this one's called New Shooting Trainer. But it's a sequel to Nintendo's electromechanical light gun game, Shooting Trainer. Other than that, we don't have much info. I'm not sure if this one was electromechanical or not as well, but because it's Nintendo, I like to mention it, just because it's Nintendo.
Oh yeah, got to keep them in there until they make their big breakthroughs in the video game history.
Yeah.
And so next up, we have Super Breaker by Hoei, which came out in March. And it's some sort of breakout clone that added obstacles, but we don't know too much more other than that. And next we have UFO number 1 by Turtle, which came out sometime in 78. It's, again, another breakout clone that seems to have added some obstacles, but we don't really know much more than that.
All these breakout clones. There's so many. And then we're going to get into the last of kind of the first gen consoles and the consoles that we've already covered in this grouping here. But we're actually going to start off with some Fairchild clones. These do exist, they're pretty rare. But the first one here is called The Channel F by Durmont. And I was a little confused about this one when I found it because I thought, oh, like Durmont, I've heard that name before. And it's because last year there was one called the Dumont Video Play, which came out in 77 and was also a Fairchild clone. So this could be the same one, just like a weird naming issue. Or it could be a completely different one called The Channel F by Durmont. So I wasn't totally sure I wanted to leave it as a, we kind of don't really know. But then for other 78 Fairchild Channel F clones that came out this year, we also have the Channel F by Emerson and the Telematch Processor by Ingelen.
And moving on to some of the chip consoles that we have, these ones were clones of the F4301, which was the Indy 500 console. We have Monza and Grand Prix by Intel, Teleball 8443 by MBO, which also had an 8500 in it. And then Telegame Speedway 4 and Speedway S100 by Sears. We'll still putting those 8500s and things in 78.
They're like, you know what? We've got some racing games here, but you know what the people want? A bunch of black and white Pong games.
Right, just tacked onto it. And it's even named the Teleball, which cracks me up, as if that's the main feature of it. And then following that, we have Ideal Computer Telematch Cassette 3 by ITT, Combat Lunaire by Stellar Electronique for Video Stellar, and these were AY3 8710, the PC50X tank games. And for the last of the chip honorable mentions that I'll be talking about, we have the AY3 8760 and 8765 chips, the Stunt Cycle games. We had the Ideal Computer Telematch Cassette 4 by ITT, the SD062 TV18, which also had the 8610 in it by Soundic, and the 18 Spinenda Videospiel, if I'm saying that right.
That sounded good.
C4016 and 20441 and 2, which is a confusing way to say that, but just a lot of model number stuff in there, which were by 2018 Color, and they both also had a 8610 in it.
All right, cool. And then moving on from that, we've got two more consoles here. These are kind of my favorite ones of this group. They're stuff from the Soviet Union, which up until this point, I guess hasn't had any first generation consoles in it because, you know, the country's probably on lockdown. And these ones, it's weird because some of them, like this first one here we're going to talk about, is called Turner. And it's actually produced by the Ministry of Electronics Industry, which is like part of the government. So they like made this and then sold it to people in the Soviet Union. But it's an 8500 console called Turner. I think it kind of has a cool story behind it. Of all the 8500s in the world, I'd probably want a Turner. But
yeah,
we also have two more here that originated from the Soviet Union called the Esky Video 1 and 2 by Electronica. And this actually used their own chip. I guess maybe getting 8500 chips from the outside world was hard. I'm not going to try to read the chip because it's a bunch of random Russian letters and numbers. But it's a Soviet-made chip, but it essentially emulated the 8500 and just played those games. But we will be seeing that chip a little bit more. There's going to be some more Russian consoles made with the chip. But those are by Electronica. All right, so now that we're done with the honorable mentions, let's get into some more reviews. I'm going to start out here with Basketball by Mattel. And we have, Wes, a world first for the podcast. And that's because I actually have this one.
Yeah.
My dad collected some of these old Mattel games, and he still had them over all these years, and Basketball is the first one that we're going to do that I actually have the physical of. So I actually have this in my hands, Basketball, and I remember playing it as a kid. Maybe not Basketball so much. There's a couple other ones that I remember a lot more than Basketball. But I was just super excited to do this because I actually have it. And it works. It's totally functional and there's no problems with it at all. So it was pretty cool. But this game's very similar to the Mattel football game that I reviewed last year. And essentially what you're trying to do is there's a bunch of dots on the screen. You're looking at half of a court from a basketball court. You've got one dot that's like pretty bright, and that's you. And you can try to move around essentially on a grid, but you're just kind of moving around the grid and you're trying to make it to the hoop that's in the top center of your screen. And what's blocking you from getting to the hoop is 5 opposing dots. It feels like a lot more than 5 when you play. But there's 5 other dots and you can't go through the dots. So they're kind of like hard barriers, but they move. Basically, they have a couple different positions they can be in, and they'll just kind of move around between them somewhat randomly. But then also, it always feels like if there's a break to the basket that's open, if you don't take that like immediately, they're going to block it again. It does feel like the dots move based upon where your dot is. So, for example, if you're right beside the basket, and then there's a dot under the basket where you need to go, you can't just wait it out until they leave. they'll never leave if you're like gonna immediately score. So there's some sort of weird AI or formulas there that actually make them interact in a more smart way, and you really almost have to go as far away from the basket as possible, wait for them to get far away from the basket as well, and then try to find an opening and quick go. And that's essentially the game. It's just kind of trying to dodge and, you know, make breaks in between these opposing dots, which are the enemies. There's a couple other things you can do. You can actually shoot the ball, and that's very interesting because if, for instance, you're far away from the basket, but there's no dots in between you and the basket, you can actually shoot it and the ball will go and you can actually score that way. But if there is a dot between you and the basket, the ball will like bounce off of the dot, the opposing player essentially. And I think it has a random chance to go anywhere after it hits an enemy dot. So it could go back to you and you could like grab the rebound essentially, or it could go to another enemy dot and it kind of feels like a pass. So it's a really cool system. It's definitely high risk, high reward for the shooting. It's a lot easier just to try to do the layups or go right under the basket and shoot where it can't be blocked or there's nothing in the way. But that's essentially the whole game. Weirdly, it's meant to be 2-player only, which is strange because you can only play one person at a time, so it's meant to be passed around essentially. But you know, you could easily play with one person, but you just are scoring for both teams. But, you know, I think it's still fun. So that's essentially the game. That's all it is. So let me get into the ratings. I'll describe it a little bit more there. I gave graphics 1.75 out of 10. You're just looking at a bunch of dots, really. But they're the weird kind of Mattel dots that we've talked about before where they almost look like LEDs or something. I don't know if that's what they are, but they have a nice look to them. And the way that they move, I think, is just really accurate to like how, I don't know, they feel like smarter than I'm sure that they are. They always feel like they're blocking you. It's really hard to get around them. And you have to be really fast to do it. So it's a very tense game, weirdly enough. There's also, I should say, a timer in the middle of the screen counting down. So you don't have forever to try to do this. You have, I think, 20 some seconds to try to score. And if the ball gets, like if you shoot and the ball gets passed between the defenders and eventually goes back to your side of the screen where you started from, then it'll be the other person's turn, as if the ball had switched to the other side of the court, which is cool. Graphically, there's not a whole lot going on, but, you know, you've got an overlay of half of a basketball court, and the positions of the people are kind of where you would expect them to be. You have an overlay of the basket, the timer, depending on who, like, one or two players playing, they'll start at a different section of the bottom of the screen, one labeled home and one labeled visitor, which is cool. And the actual handheld itself, it's pretty plain, but right around the playing screen where you're playing at, there's kind of almost like a 3D printed, it's not 3D printed, but you know what I mean? It's kind of like a staircase effect of the plastic around the playing field to make it look like there's stands there, which is cool.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so it's pretty nice, actually. The main thing is when you're playing, it weirdly feels a lot like basketball. So I thought it was pretty cool, actually.
Oh, I was wondering with the graphics, too. How do you know when someone has the ball? Is there a graphic for that, or is it like a blinking light?
It's like a blinking light, yeah.
Okay.
So if you actually have the ball and you're just walking around with it, your light is brighter than the other lights. But then if you actually shoot the ball, it's like kind of a blinking thing. And you can actually go and possibly rebound the ball, which is pretty cool.
Oh, but there is, if you shoot, you can actually see like the ball on screen. Oh, nice.
It's really fast. So chances are is more of a luck-based thing, whether you get a rebound or not. But you can see the ball go, which is pretty cool. And it's really fun when you actually get like a 3-point off.
Yeah.
I don't think it scores like that, but if you just shoot it from far away and then you get to see that blink go boom, boom, boom right into the net, it's like, oh yeah, that was cool. So it's pretty fun. But let me move into now how fun it was for me. So for gameplay, I give it a 3 out of 10. I think it's really fun. I like it. I remember playing it as a kid, not as much as some of the other ones, but compared especially to football, which I reviewed before, the gameplay is pretty similar, but for basketball, it just makes a lot more sense than it does for football. For football, there was only like 3 dots for defenders, and you just like they couldn't tackle you, so it was just moving around trying to find a break and stuff. Also in football, like you could never run backwards. I guess that's how they made it so you could get tackled or whatever. But on this one, you can run any direction. And since there's 5 dots opposing you, it feels more like a normal basketball game. And overall, it just worked for this game a lot better. So I liked it a lot more. So I had a good amount of fun with it. For a while, I was playing it just for fun, and also playing it because I wanted to see what would happen. Like I read in the manual, this was going to get into sound, but I read in the manual that there's like an end of game sound, but I never heard that. So even though I played a bunch of games, but let me move into sound. For sound, I gave it a 1.75 out of 10. The main sounds you're hearing a click down for the timer, which makes it very tense, and I like. There's a sound when you miss or the ball gets, basically the defenders get it, or the timer went to 0, and it's basically like a game over type sound buzzer, which is kind of normal. But then you also get a nice kind of dinging or something when you actually get a score. And those were the main sounds I heard. In the manual, it says that there was an end of quarter sound and an end of game sound or end of half, and I never heard that. So unless it's the exact same sound as like when you turn the ball over, which it could be, I didn't hear those, but I thought the sounds were okay for what they were. The best sound I think is the getting in the basket sound, which is probably a good sign. So I gave it 1.75, nothing crazy. And then relevance, I gave it a 6.5 out of 10. I don't think this one is as relevant as football, which launched this like sports lineup that we're going to go through. And I think some of the other ones like baseball are going to be even better. But I definitely like basketball a lot. And I wanted to give it some points and relevance just because it also impacted me when I was growing up. So overall, I gave it 2.25 out of 10. It's pretty fun. It definitely feels outdated nowadays. But I think the core gameplay of it is pretty fun. It's the best implementation of Mattel's handhelds to date, I think. But I'm kind of still looking forward to that next step where it takes it a step further. So we'll have to see. Yeah, that's Basketball by Mattel.
Nice. Very cool.
And it's fun because I have it with me. I can play
Right,
anytime
yeah.
I want.
That's a first. We never really had one that we could actually play the original hardware.
Yeah. So, but now let's move on, Wes. I'm curious to know what you thought about yours. I think I might have gotten it confused with a different one when I gave it to you, but I hope it's still good. Why don't you talk about Armor Battle?
Yeah. So I think you were right on. We're going to talk about another Mattel handheld that came out in 78. Unfortunately, one that we do not have that I could actually play, but I did get to watch a lot of videos of people playing on the original hardware and got a good idea of it. Just to talk about the box for it a little bit, because I saw some great videos on that. It says it's for ages 8 to 80, which I feel like is that cliched, like used on board games and everything, instead of saying it's for all ages. So that was really funny. The box itself has a lot of great drawings of like tanks battling on it, because it's called Armor Battle, meaning like tanks fighting each other. And similar to a lot of Mattel games, the game itself is a nice compact size. The screen's in the middle, has Armor Battle in big letters right above the screen, and below it is all the controls in the center. The whole body of this is this bright red color, which I really liked. And then there's a black plastic base for the front of it. And the screen has this really good overlay of 2 tanks facing each other, looking like they're about to fire, with the timer in the middle of them. And then the overlay for sort of the bulbs, the LEDs, whatever they are, that do the main graphics for Mattel handhelds, is this like topographic style map where it's just like all the swirlies for like elevation and stuff like that. But basically, it is a grid as far as the lights go, but it gives you just this sort of like nice, I don't know, almost as if you're like a commander in like an old school command game, like telling tanks or moving them across the board like they do in the movies, basically. So it gives you that nice kind of feel with it. For the general gameplay of Armor Battle, it's one player versus a computer-controlled tank that spawn in separate locations on the map that vary each time you play the game. I think your tank always spawns on the outer edge, and I'm guessing the other tank has to be a certain number of spaces away from you, wherever it shows up. You have 99 seconds counting up to kill the tank as many times as possible, and that's how you get your points. After you shoot the tank, both of them spawn back in different locations, and one of the main obstacles is mines that are in between you and the opposing tank, so you can't just drive up to it and shoot it. And in this, unlike basketball, you can't shoot the opposing tank from several spaces away. You have to be adjacent to it. So the way that you find these mines, they don't show up visually, but you get a beeping noise whenever you're adjacent to one of them. So it's sort of like Minesweeper, where you use process of elimination and the knowledge of, well, there's one next to me here. If I move to this space, is there still one next to me? Okay, now I know that it's not in this space, and that kind of thing until you figure out which ones are perfectly safe or at least most likely safe. And if you do hit a mine, you spawn at the start and the time's still counting, but you don't have lives or anything. The enemy tank doesn't actually move, but it can shoot you whenever you're in an adjacent space. And the enemy tank can shoot diagonally as well, whereas you can only shoot horizontally and vertically. And there's this neat little warning beep that plays, and after 3 seconds, if you've heard that beep 3 times, the enemy tank shoots you, and it's basically the same as hitting a mine. You spawn back, and you have to keep going. You have to find your way back to it to shoot it again.
Does the tank change place whenever you hit a mine, or is it like, okay, I know where a mine is now, and I can just go a different way?
Yeah, so it's the second one there where you can actually learn if you hit a mine or get shot by the enemy tank.
Okay.
You know your safe path, and then after you shoot the tank is the only time that the mines get randomized again and the tank shows up in a different location.
Gotcha.
And also there's this interesting thing where after you get a point, the game actually just stops and shows your screen, and you have to push an input for the timer to start again. So even though it is counting up to 99, there actually is like this built-in pause when you get a point, which I thought was really interesting. And to get a new game after you've got up to 99, you just have to restart the system, which is a little weird, but I guess it's kind of what allows them to have that pause in there and all that. So getting into my ratings for this, the graphics, I gave it a 2 out of 10. Obviously, when you're comparing it to arcade cabinets and computer graphics, they fall a lot short looking at these handhelds, but I was really surprised how good it still looks. This is a big improvement over other Mattel handhelds as far as the fidelity of each of the lights, because instead of it being just sort of the rectangular light line that we've seen in most of these games, it actually is like a light shining through what I'm guessing is like a plastic design of a tank, and an actual detailed tank. You can see the treads, you can clearly see the barrel and the top of the tank, and they differentiate the two tanks by having just the enemy tank look exactly the same, except it's always blinking off and on, which I think is smart, because if you made both of them look different, it would probably limit the amount of spaces that each tank could show up on, because one would be an enemy tank space and one would be a friendly tank space. But this way, any tank can occupy any space, and it gives you a lot more variability. And I didn't count, but I think it's either a 4x4 or a 4x5 grid. So pretty small, but still a decent amount of space to move around, and the map looks a decent bit different when each tank shows up in a different location. And even though it doesn't really count as graphics, I did really enjoy the topographic style map on top of the screen. It gives you this nice sort of, combat vibe. It's weird to say, but it gives you the sort of tank fight vibe. It's cool. And it would have, of course, been nice to see some visuals for the tank exploding, but I do recognize, it's a Mattel handheld in 78. There's only so many things they can do. So then for sound, I went really high on this one and gave it a 2.5 out of 10, which is kind of crazy for a handheld, but it makes a really impressive assortment of sounds. There are different tunes for when you hit the enemy and when you are shot, or you hit a mine, there's a constant ticking, which is probably very similar to the basketball one, to signify the time counting up. But then there's also a loud series of buzzing noises whenever you're next to a bomb. There's a different beep to warn you when an enemy tank is about to shoot you. And then to top that all off, there's a third tune when the game ends. And also there's tunes for when you hit the enemy. And then I think there's another one built in there, but I forget exactly when that happens. Just little simple things. I think one of them is an excerpt from an actual song. The other one are just sort of like little melodies. And all of them are just really simple beeps, but they're all used to really good effect in this. And after hearing you talk about basketball, I'm sure a lot of them were the same hardware for maybe the buzzers for if you miss, or like the buzzing noises for the mines. But same thing we're talking about when we're comparing these games. Sometimes it can have the exact same hardware, but the context of it really kind of helps determine the impact. So that's part of why I think all of them were just used really well in this handheld. And then for gameplay, I gave it a 3 out of 10. I was comparing it to my first score for Auto Race, which was the first Mattel handheld that we covered, and I think possibly the first handheld console. And I gave Auto Race some really high ratings, but everything, it was edging out above this because, I mean, that was way back in 76, I think, and then this is in 78, so obviously it's not going to be as great by comparison. But I did give gameplay higher for Armor Battle just because it's so fun, even though it's this really simple gameplay when you first look at it. But there's a lot of aspects that I wouldn't expect in such a simple game, where it's not just find your way to the tank and shoot it, but you have to think about the mines. And they have the beeping so that you have to use process of elimination because you can't actually see the mines. You don't instantly lose if you hit one or you get shot, which I really like. I like for this handheld kind of like game, I feel like the style of highest score within this amount of time, your only barrier is like how well you play the game, basically. I think that really lends itself to the sort of addictive, keep playing over and over again kind of thing that this handheld's going for. And in addition to that, since when you're next to the tank, it shoots you if you wait too long. It's just this slight added thing that makes the simple game feel tense because you can't just wait there. Like once you're next to it, you have to shoot right away or else you're going to get shot. And I also like that the game pauses in between rounds, so you can take a breather if you want, just a weird little thing. But it's nice that the timer's not constantly going for that 99 seconds. And it just all feels like really surprisingly engaging gameplay for a handheld. So I could easily see people at the time just really going at it to beat each other's high scores. For relevance, I gave it a 7 out of 10. A lot of these handhelds are still around today, and it seems like a lot of people remember them really fondly. I mean, even just within our own podcast circle of Ben and his dad having these. Not Armor Battle specifically, but... And so I don't know if Armor Battle was particularly more popular than the others, but I think it's definitely still relevant just because it was so easy to find videos of people playing it today and like doing historical looks at it. And if I am talking about Armor Battle specifically, I just think it's a really interesting turn from racing and sports Mattel games. It's obviously like the same hardware, but a really innovative concept to just throw into a handheld in 78. And so overall, I gave it a 2.5 out of 10. I really love Armor Battle. It has a lot of charm. It's super fun. It just seems really well executed. Obviously, it's lacking a bunch when compared to arcade and computer games of the time. But for what it is in the handheld format, I think it's like previous Mattel games where I could honestly pick it up today and at least have like 30 minutes or an hour of fun with it, which is kind of saying a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was real excited to look at that one, and it's got that weird Minesweeper vibe to it. There's just a lot of cool stuff going on.
Yeah, that's good because I think I got it confused with another one, which is like the sequel, which is also coming out in 78. So now I'm even more pumped for that one.
Yeah, unless it doesn't change anything, and then we'll hate it. But
I think it'll be fun. But yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. And so we did have one more Mattel game that we wanted to mention, Space Alert, which came out towards the very end of 78, it'll be rebranded and re-released as Battlestar Galactica. So the first of those, the reason that we wanted to bring it up in our special topic today, but Space Alert itself was also kind of just a re-release of Missile Attack with new theming. So not sure if there's going to be much interesting going on with it. They might have just kind of slapped a Battlestar Galactica label on it and resold it, which is honestly probably pretty smart.
I'm not sure which one, if Space Alert or Battlestar Galactica came first with that release. I want to say it was Space Alert, and then when Battlestar Galactica came out, they did that. But I also feel like it's possible that, because didn't Battlestar Galactica come out in like Europe first? Like maybe one is like a Europe thing and one's like a US thing. I'm not sure, but
it could be. Yeah, I think the theatrical version came out in Europe first, but the pilot came out around the same time in both. So
okay,
who knows? But
yeah. But that'll do it for us today, guys. I hope you enjoyed that one. Just as a kind of quick summary, I did the PC 505, which I was really worried about, but it was actually like an okay PC 50X chip. And after that, Wes took a look at Extra Inning and finally got in on the good Midway baseball action, although this one was kind of a letdown a little bit, but it's still really good. And then we did a bunch of Mattel games. I did basketball, which I actually have in my hands. And Wes did Armor Battle, which is the one that I wish I had in my hands. but they're pretty cool. I forgot to mention, too, I want to quickly say, basketball has a difficulty switch between easy and hard mode. But the hard mode is literally impossible. So, didn't add that much.
It was a nice thought.
Yeah. But I was thinking about Armor Battle and was like, oh, Armor Battle doesn't have one of those. I just kind of assumed. Although the Armor Battle has that weird, you like shoot from the side, which is very strange.
That's true. I forgot to mention that the fire button's on the side of the handheld. You kind of like hit it with your thumb, and you have to hit a direction button at the same time, or else it doesn't fire.
Very strange.
Interesting stuff.
On basketball, it was just like right by the 4-way directional pad. It was just like a button. It was like, you can hit this and you don't have to aim at all.
That seems to make more sense.
Yeah, it's like it knows where you're going to the basket. Right. But yeah, some pretty cool Mattel ones. With all of the Mattel handhelds, I don't think I have dates for them, but I do think that the order, we have some sort of general idea of what the order was for when they came out. So I just broke them up. We're going to be covering them in a couple different sections throughout the year, and we'll do a couple at a time, just like today. So I hope you guys are looking forward to more. I've got at least 3 or 4 more physicals ones that my dad collected when he was a kid that we're going to go through. So I'm really excited about that, but we'll just have to wait till next time for that.
Yeah, so make sure to check us out on Twitter if we make any announcements there. Send us an email if you have any questions, and check out our website because we're always updating it with information, and who knows, we might have pictures of Ben's actual Mattel handhelds there at some point.
Oh, yeah. It'll be cool. All right. And with that, we'll see you next week.
See y'all next time.